Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so Sam Harris came out on his podcast recently to address the fact that his name popped up in the Epstein files. Not in a super prominent way, but he was one of these ones that was passing emails back and forth with Epstein. Seems like there's only one chain of emails, and he addresses that. Although it's a little weird, a little fishy what he happens to say in this little email thread, and so he gets into all that, as well as detailing his one and in his retelling only encounter with Epstein, as well as the fact that their email exchange in the first place had to do with Sam Harris's feud with Noam Chomsky, who does appear very prominently in this dump of Epstein files and the previous ones as well. A lot of correspondence and seemingly a pretty robust relationship between Noam Chomsky and Epstein. So I'll get into all that as well as how it ties into the broader picture, but just wanted to highlight this. Here's what Sam Harris had to say about being in the Epstein files, as well as what he thinks about Trump's involvement in the Epstein files.
You have a bunch of guys who are eager and to cheat on their wives or to sleep with young, beautiful women who they don't necessarily want to be seen with in public. But these young, beautiful women are not underage for the most part, right? So you have these. And we can be very judgmental about all this behavior, sure, but I just think it still strikes me as extraordinarily unlikely that there are many people who are guilty the way Epstein was of, targeting underage girls, knowingly targeting underage girls. I just think that would be a surprise, given that many of these guys had relationships with Epstein that were deep enough and long enough such that you can't believe they didn't know what he was into. And I don't believe that Trump was ignorant of Epstein's actual appetites and behavior, because we have it from his own mouth where he said, some say he loves beautiful women as much as I do, and his are on the young side or something. Like what the only thing that could mean is that Trump was aware. But again, I would be surprised if Trump is the sort of guy who wants to sleep with a 13-year-old. That would surprise me. I met this man exactly once, as far as I know. It's totally possible I was at some kind of party or dinner party, at a TED conference, very likely, where he was also in the room. But the only time I'm aware of having met him was at a lunch at TED that had maybe 12 people at it. And I described the immediate impression I got, which was that he was a colossal douchebag, because he had a very attractive young Asian woman on his knee, kind of bouncing along on his knee the whole during the whole lunch, and it was pretty clear they weren't newlyweds or newly engaged, or people who just were going to spend the rest of their lives together and just couldn't be apart for 10 seconds. And also, the way he was relating to her, he was as a kind of accessory. It was just a weird sugar daddy vibe where he thought he was coming off like Cary Grant. And he was coming off like a total sleazebag. So that was the impression I formed of him. And as far as I knew, that was my only interaction with him ever. And now we discover that he had sent me an email inviting me. Do you want to take it now? Do you want to read that email?
Yeah, let's start with this. So this is what was discovered. Epstein to you, Sam, we met with John Brockman at the TED event. I thought you might enjoy a dinner with Woody Allen, Chomsky, and me. It should be fun. What do you write? By the way, this is May of 2015. What do you write back? Oh my God, you could have been killed for this. You said, only if we film it, smiley face. Yeah. Oh my God, how bad this could have been.
This is a humbling encounter with the vagaries of memory for me, because I literally have no memory of this exchange. One would think I would remember. First, let me just say that in my understanding at this point, Epstein was just this billionaire who gave a lot of money to scientists, and he funded a lot of scientific research. I mean, that was my understanding of who he was. I believe that's all I knew about him until I had lunch with him and just got a vibe that he was a douchebag. Again, that's all I knew about him. And I certainly would think I would remember this billionaire inviting me to a dinner with Woody Allen and Noam Chomsky. So again, zero memory of that. When I read my response, I immediately understood what I must have meant, which is, okay, you're inviting me to a dinner with Chomsky. The only way I'm walking into that room is if the cameras are rolling, because I forget when I had it, but I had an email war with Chomsky.
So that explains the film it thing. You thought you're going to have a collision if we were going to.
Yeah, so I just thought, you're going to put me in a room with Chomsky, that this is going to be great and also just crazy. But the thing is, I have no memory of this invitation. There's no evidence that I ever took it seriously. I just said, only if we film it, and then I never responded to him again.
But he just basically I spent quite a lot of time with him recently. Odd, but he is warm and funny. In fact, very in both categories. I would suggest that as some age, the energy required to keep separate their views and their person is required elsewhere in the body. So debate is virtually ad hominem, like it or not, more charm, unless this guy's, by the way, these emails are not easy to read. There's punctuation all over the place, and it's not really. And less argument, I respectfully suggest we will get your desired engagement. So he's saying more charm and less argument.
Right.
He's coaching you.
So I never responded to that.
All right. So at first, Sam starts this off by doing what a lot of public intellectuals feel the need to do, or pseudo-intellectuals feel the need to do in relation to this Epstein stuff, which is draw this distinction between the really young girls and the young girls who were above age. And thankfully, Sam Harris does specify that Epstein was into very young girls like that. That's part of the picture here. Now, in Sam Harris's case, I don't think that he seems to be very culpable, although he did have this meeting with Epstein, he says at a TED event, and said that Epstein was like sleazy. I don't know, it makes me wonder how much that stands out among other events like that. But also there's a couple fishy things that he says. I mean, he says he completely doesn't remember the correspondence with Epstein, which is kind of a coincidence. And also his response to saying, do you want to have dinner with Chomsky and Woody Allen, is to say, only if we film it. That is genuinely nuts that that's what he said. And I can see how what he meant there was referring to Chomsky and not wanting to talk to him without a camera. Imagine if that was something that came out in this file dump, Chomsky versus Sam Harris debating at Epstein's dinner table. But just kind of strange and a very odd thing to say in that situation. Kind of strikes right to the core of what exactly Epstein had going on. So it's funny to think that Sam Harris stumbled upon that purely by chance of his own self-involvement. And I have many criticisms of Sam Harris, but it's true that Noam Chomsky comes out of the Epstein situation looking much worse. Chomsky is all over these files and was close with Epstein, at least like for a time. And one of these messages that Epstein sent to Sam Harris, the one that Sam Harris supposedly didn't respond to, it says that I've been spending a lot of time with him and he's odd but very warm, friendly guy. So Epstein's trying to draw Sam Harris in here and seems to be talking to Sam Harris pretty friendly. Seems like there's some familiarity here. So I don't know if that was just Epstein's way of trying to manipulate people, but if Sam Harris doesn't remember this correspondence with him, it's possible that they had other correspondence in person that he also quote unquote doesn't remember. But it's a shame that Noam Chomsky is essentially at a point in his life where he can't really speak to these things. This came out really towards the end of his life. He's still alive. There were some rumors that he had died not too long ago, but he's still alive. But I don't think he can even, I don't know that he's capable of speaking or of responding to all of this in any way. So it's a brutal way to go out. There's no evidence that he was connected directly to like trafficking or anything like that. There are some, direct pieces of evidence when it comes to other people. Not the case when it comes to Noam Chomsky, but I would say his closeness to Epstein apparently is evidence enough, at least, of bad judgment. Because like Sam Harris is saying here, he makes an apt point that anybody who was around him probably knew how deep the rabbit hole goes. They could sense that it gets deeper and deeper. And so that's really just a point against Chomsky's like discernment as a person, and even being somebody who like wants funding for research or whatever. It's still, you know, that issue of proximity to power that Chomsky himself spoke about. You know what I mean? Like, obviously Epstein in some ways was showing him some kind of opulence or something, and maybe that got into sexual territory, maybe it didn't, but that was just how he operated. He wanted to impress people and to make people feel like they were witnessing something very powerful, and that was the nature of conversations that Epstein and Noam Chomsky were apparently having. And I've said before that some of the stuff that Noam Chomsky wrote about, you know, who controls the world, how power actually works on a global basis, was around the time that he was meeting up with and being friends with Jeffrey Epstein. And he later wrote that Epstein influenced his thinking about certain topics. So that would imply that some of the writing that he did around that time was influenced by whatever he saw and talked about hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein. So that's just the nature of the kind of influence that Epstein wanted to have with these people. And it's clearly a lack of judgment and a susceptibility to that type of opulence, something that Epstein had to offer, Noam Chomsky was susceptible to. So it's quite unfortunate, and ultimately, I still think that when it comes to his debate with Sam Harris, they never had an on-camera debate, but they debated on email, and it ended up getting published on Sam Harris's end. And essentially, their debate was that Noam Chomsky compares the, you know, death rate of Americans or the West, things that Israel might do in Gaza, for example, to the other acts of other countries that America deems as evil, and says that oftentimes the body count is the same or comparable. Sam Harris says not taking into account intent when it comes to those considerations is a morally bankrupt way of looking at it. So here's a couple clips just illustrating very quickly both of their points on that.
At the end of the day, he simply wants to use body count as the only metric to discuss the moral stature of two sides in a conflict. So if we kill a dozen children unintentionally, well, that's every bit as bad as doing it intentionally. That, I think, is a bad way to look at human conflict. I think the people who are intending to kill children are different than the people who are intending to kill the people who are killing children and are accidentally killing children in the process.
Nobody except the ultra-right-wing jingoists like Kaplan is comparing atrocities by various countries. What honest people are saying is that we should pay attention to our own crimes and stop committing them. This would be true even if we were killing one person. Okay, and it's even more true when we're killing millions of people.
Yeah, so I think Noam Chomsky, personal discreditations aside, I think that his argument is ultimately going to be the one that continues to bear out and bear true. And this thing that Sam Harris is saying about if somebody kills 10 babies and it's an accident because you're trying to kill the person who's killing babies, is that the same as if you wanted to kill 10 babies? That's an argument that he's making in defense of Western tactics, specifically Israel in Gaza, killing babies because it is specifically targeting them. And it's the same exact conversation of, well, are we killing the babies because that's what we want to kill, or because terrorists are hiding behind babies and so we have to kill the babies? So Sam Harris is making this argument 10 years ago and beyond. It seems that after a certain amount of time of having to defend the act of killing babies, because this isn't even Noam Chomsky at this point in modern day driving this conversation about Israel and the West are targeting children and women, which they're still doing to this day in Gaza, by the way. That's just the conversation that's happening. And so Sam Harris and defenders of the type of weaponry and the type of military action that the West partakes in are still defending this tactic of killing civilians first and then framing them as terrorists later. So it seems like if there was a positive or non-maniacal intent in Sam Harris's doing that, at some point he would have realized that he is being taken advantage of by the entity that is carrying out those murders of children. If you are continually trotting out the same arguments about why it's more excusable when the West kills children, then maybe at some point your ability to articulate that well is being taken advantage of. And so not coming to that conclusion at some point kind of implies that you're purposely and willingly covering for the West's ability to do things like target children and women. And Noam Chomsky, like he said in his clip, was not necessarily saying that you have to compare all these things on a completely amoral basis, but rather that scrutiny needs to be applied to the type of tactics that the West and the US is taking, without assuming that the enemies that we're targeting are more morally reprehensible, which justifies more violence. And I want to end this by saying I have one piece of bad news and two pieces of good news. So the bad news is that conspiracy culture is not going anywhere. It's here to stay. It helped Trump win both times, even more so the second time. And it is a driving force behind much of the change that we're seeing in culture that led to Donald Trump. You can tie that to fascism and similar kind of cultural movements that have looked the same in the past. But ultimately, it is this uniquely American tendency towards conspiracy and making entertainment out of conspiracy, and every person having their own individual perspective on the conspiracies of the world that has only grown and led to this very confusing, constantly misinformed time that we live in. So that's not going anywhere. And this Epstein stuff is only accelerating that. It's adding to that, throwing fuel on the fire. And many of the people who either previously subscribed to various kinds of conspiracies or have become interested in them more recently feel like this is vindication of whatever their various take on a conspiracy might be. There are flat earthers who feel like this is vindication of their conspiracies. QAnon people feel like this is vindication. People who feel like Trump is guilty of crimes with Epstein feel like this is vindication of that. People who don't think that he's guilty of crimes with Epstein feel like this is vindication of that. And I think there's more information on that. We'll get to that later. But my point is that this is not going to help when it comes to creating like a unified version of reality. And it's not even clear exactly what is going to come out of the whole Epstein scandal still, how all of these different pieces are going to come together, as well as what information still hasn't come out. Are there any major bombshells that haven't dropped? We'll find out. But the first piece of good news is that Donald Trump is not exempt from that conspiracy culture. And the new version that we're starting to experience now that is being accelerated by the Epstein files, Trump is a player in that at best. And many people still associate him with preventing the release of these files. And I think there's a lot of people whose opinion of Trump will never be repaired. They sort of can't unsee that version of him that they had never seen before. But I think there's a decent amount of people who right now are saying, well, there's no proof of anything. There's anonymous tips and there's many mentions of Trump by Epstein, but we're not seeing correspondence between the two of them, and we're not seeing any type of proof of any transactions or meetings that they had, because most of what we're seeing was from a time where they were no longer corresponding. But I still think, and some Democrats like Ro Khanna seem to think, that there's more documents that they haven't released, and they are moving towards taking action against the White House for breaking the law that was passed by Trump himself and Congress to release all these files. So that's the leverage that they have, is that they passed this law that says legally you have to release things in a certain way. And so now, because of the redactions and other things about this release, like how long they're stalling, and supposedly the fact that there's more that still hasn't been released, at least that's being claimed, they're threatening to sue the government over that. So that could lead to the release of more files. I don't know if there's more scheduled to be released or what exactly the deal is with that, but it does seem like there are hints at more things that we don't know about. So Trump's role in this conspiracy is going to continue to have legs, and people are going to continue to be open to hearing about Trump's involvement in this, as well as the overall conspiracy of it all. Which leads to the other piece of good news, which is that the surveillance state, the sort of Palantir surveillance state that's being built currently under the Trump administration, is also not exempt from that conspiracy culture worldview. So as people create their different versions of reality and piece it together based on different pieces of information, things are going to get confusing and remain confusing. So it's important to have a certain amount of resolve and clarity about the fact that the enemy is that growing surveillance state, because that surveillance state goes all the way down to the root. It goes all the way back to Israel and defense contracts happening there with companies like Palantir that are finding innovative ways to round up and identify Palestinians, target them on an individual level, and then now that technology is being turned inward. That's the type of technology and its use in Israel and in Gaza that Sam Harris has defended for years, by the way. That's the type of technology that he would tell you is a good solution to the idea that, oh, we're trying to do these missions as targeted as a way of as possible, and so we've still killed as many women and children as possible, and we've also created incredibly sophisticated targeting machinery. And now that's being turned inward on United States citizens. And so that is connected with Jeffrey Epstein. That is connected with Donald Trump, Peter Thiel, who was also connected with Jeffrey Epstein, who is connected with the government of Israel. And it goes all the way down. And so remaining focused on that and every development of that surveillance state as it grows, reminding people of that picture is going to be able to embed itself in people's consciousness over time, despite the fact that everything's confusing and everybody believes 20 shades of things that aren't true. People are still hungry for what is true. So having message discipline about the true enemy, which is the creation of this surveillance state by fascist consolidation in the government currently, but really going back to a larger neoliberal project that's been happening throughout the world for a long time, that is something that people are open to hearing about now, and it is reaffirmed by these files, as well as lots of the other news that's coming out. So I think that's probably the right way to approach all of this.
Me too close to, too much to do. The mission is too crucial. Shout it out from the rooftops until I lose vocals. Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity.